Good morning, everyone. It is 20th of August, 2025. The International Biodynamic Research Conference is next week, and I have the delight of introducing Craig from Cloud Forest Organics. This morning he'll be presenting at the conference, and I wanted a sneak preview, and he has agreed to share some of what he's presenting at the conference. This will go up on YouTube, and people who can't get to the conference can learn a little more about the work that you do. So without further ado, I'm going to go on mute and let you take over, Craig. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Well, thank you, Katrina. Really appreciate the opportunity to meet with you virtually before meeting you at the conference. Looking forward to attending it. It's the third International Biodynamic Agriculture Conference that's going to be at the Royal Agricultural University. By the time you see this, the conference will have likely transpired. The title of my talk is Cloud Forest Recovery, Endemic Species, Agroforestry, and Scientific Inquiry of Emerging Plants. Where does this all come from, and where's the connection between cloud forest recovery and reforestation with biodynamic agriculture? That was actually one of the questions that was raised in considering my participation. And my background is in organic agriculture, which evolved naturally into biodynamic, not by a specific planning of it, but because that was how nature seemed to support us, and we stopped needing external inputs. The understanding the rhythms of nature and gave us the possibility, and this is back in the 90s, of establishing Andean Organics, which is the first certified organic farm in Ecuador, and it was a commercial farm, and it was originally a cattle farm that we converted into a vegetable farm. We fast forward to a period where I became interested in cloud forest recovery. Cloud forests are 90% extinct globally. They're expected to be gone by 2060, and yet they're one of the most, if not the most, biodiverse biomes on Earth and a provider of water. And I wouldn't call it a project, it's a program, it's an experiment of a new agroforestry system that's based entirely on native trees. And the question that I ask, which ties to the concept of biodynamics, is what would happen if you introduced no external inputs, including crops? Because somehow with biodynamics, it's understood that it should be an enclosed system. And yet, but it's okay to introduce carrots. It's okay to introduce potatoes. But what if you don't introduce anything? What would happen? So it's kind of like being on a stage and falling down and throwing yourself down and wondering, are you going to crash? Are you going to produce? What will happen? And with that, let me ask Katrina if she can just show the 5-minute segment of the documentary Crystal Frog. It's actually, it's won a number of awards at screening and festivals in a number of countries right now.
I contact the agronomist who I worked with years ago at Andean Organics, and he says, yeah, I'll join you. But in your model, we're going to also give equal emphasis to some of the other trees because we don't know what's actually going to work. Let's incorporate logma, which is actually a type of caramel flavored fruit that's akin to the lucuma. Let's put in the tote, which is a wild walnut. Let's put in the motilon that the indigenous leader had recommended. And what about the IUCN red list trees? Let's put those in the model as well. The white cedars and the red cedars and the wax palms. And then I'm thinking, well, what about the species that are preferred by the wildlife? Let's put those in the model too. And we start implementing systems to battle those grasses. We put in different mulch systems, you plant trees of different sizes, and we start developing an agroforestry system where there's true biodiversity.
olor a chocolate esto. De vainilla.
Yo quiero ver.
Esto, chocolate.
Completamente huele a chocolate. Tal vez puede ser lo opuesto de vainilla, como vainilla es orquídea, tal vez puede haber una orquídea de chocolate.
Está sangre de dragón, ¿no? Pero atrás, ese árbol que está desparramado, digamos, las ramas, tuvo un crecimiento mucho más acelerado. Es parte de la flora emergente.
So here we are, we're tracking the growth of the trees. We're seeing the response in terms of growth, in terms of girth of the trees, in terms of height of the trees. And we're starting to see how the wildlife is responding to the areas that we planted. And we're comparing this with areas where that we've planted nothing and seeing how rewilding is coming into play. We're experimenting with even more new foods, and we're trying, distillations of essential oils from the emerging growth that's coming up. In the forest, the matico del monte, the wild matico, is a plant that grows spontaneously between the trees that are our target trees. So we're curious to see what benefit this has as well. The idea is that, well, we may have picked the poroton, or we may have picked the nogal, or we may have picked the tocte, that there's a world of other species out there, and there's so much to learn. And that's why the cloud forest is so special. One of the reasons is that, yes, there are many products that we can find, but it's the whole ecosystem. And this is just one really cool blue oil.
Lo espectacular es que es el único aceite de todos los que he hecho hasta ahora que es azul. Eso es espectacular. Todos son amarillos o medios blanquitos, pero nunca azul. Por eso digo que debe ser una cosa muy particular.
And we're also discovering that there's just so much learning on every front. Even in the soils, we discover that the mycelium structure is different in each of our test plots. And with all the testing that we need to do to comply with FDA regulations, we discover that there's DNA variations in the seeds and in the plants that we're developing. And we discover that there's a differences in the seeds between different GPS located mother trees. And we also discover that the interrelation between the fauna that's beginning to make use of this agroforestry system is actually affecting the tree growth. Like the guatusa is eating the bark of the tree. And we realize there's a lot more going on here, more than just a simple agroforestry system.
Yes, great. Yeah, this is just a small segment, just to give you a sense of, this is actually a snapshot within the middle of the film, and the music unfortunately doesn't come through, but I think you got the idea. What I'm going to do is kind of orient to where we are. So if you can share the screen, I'm gonna go through some slides. You know what? We're not gonna use it. It's quite fine. I think we're gonna do it this way anyway. I had my doubts anyway. So anyway,
Old school.
this is a map of South America. And if you look at this particular area, this is the Amazon basin. When many people think about the Amazon basin, they forget the fact that the Andean Amazon, which is this whole strip, is the principal source of water that flows into the Amazon River and out east to the Atlantic Ocean. So we are based up here, and this whole area is cloud forest, is one of the best preserved cloud forests on Earth, but it's also disappearing. So the idea was, how do we bring back the cloud forest? And so the idea was, well, on the one hand, there's pressure and incentives to grow something there that will produce revenue to justify existing. And then there's the carbon credit models, which don't seem to reach anyone that I know. So the question is, well, so how do you create a system that's truly making the land work for food, for nature, for climate, all at once? How can you do all of these things? And the idea was, well, what if we set up an agroforestry system? I studied agribusiness at Harvard Business School. So I was thinking, if someone's going to take the risk, maybe it should be me, because I've had successful agribusiness ventures in the past. I was the first yellow honeydew melon exporter to Europe, and I was involved with quinoa way back when, and say, well, how do we make this work? Let's give it a try. And so we set up a system where we planted within cattle grazing area a number of different trees. And I guess for that, I'm going to kind of look at my presentation, at least, even if you can't see it, to understand, what we're doing. On the site, by the way, we have a research center called Crystal Frog, and the idea is to have a center of research specifically for cloud forest recovery. And that one of my hopes was to find researchers that would be interested in supporting this type of work. And so that's the hope. The methodology would first be to understand our site. So we actually have a full-time geographer in the project to do mappings, understand how the land has changed, how it's changed over time. We identified the trees on both trees that were productive as well as trees that were at risk of extinction, and we decided to include those in our model. And we then set up a planting system, and we experimented with different fertilization systems. The big conclusion there was that less is more, because as long as we're using the irrigation system of the mountain and planting with the curves, since we're not introducing anything, the idea of even creating fertilizers that you would normally do turned out to be counterproductive in our case. Why? The trees grew too fast. They have their own rhythm, they have their own system. At first, we're saying, well, this tree is stunted and this one's growing really fast. Maybe this one needs help. But then we looked more closely and we discovered what was going on, that certain animal species at risk of extinction were consuming the bark of that tree. Then we did further research and found, well, that tree bark has medicinal qualities. So while I was thinking of this particular tree, which was, a superfood protein, where we succeeded in making gluten-free bread, we succeeded in making a trilogy of desserts with the leading chocolate pastry company in Ecuador. We found that, well, the wildlife had great need of that tree. So it's okay, we're gonna go with that. But there were other species, for example, like the logma, which is akin to the lucuma, which is the #1 yogurt and ice cream flavor in Peru, turned out to be very successful on the site. And furthermore, we used our ingenuity of our lab to create powders and products which we were able to sell to the leading Italian gelato maker in Ecuador. So he's making ice cream with that, which is phenomenal. So the fertilizer system, is an area where with biodynamics, well, I guess it's never really been considered when you're only planting trees native to the environment. Then your needs change, but it's completely consistent with the concept, because the concept is one of a symbiosis, one of a living system. So from if you go to the philosophical basis of biodynamics, and you look at the writings and the works of Goethe, and you look at the works of Steiner, you see complete compatibility. So that if we were to need a tool, if we were to need those things, certainly we would comply with biodynamics, particularly because the hope is to create a new agroforestry food model that could bring revenue to cloud forest dwellers, who could then find products within a biodiverse system. So the idea is to always comply, but again, less is more. So it's the same with an organic system. If you're using fewer inputs, you still qualify. there's no, oh, you didn't use this, there's nothing you have to use, but these are tools at your disposition. But we found, for example, and this is an area where Andrea is doing particular research, is on the fungal structure, the mycelium structure, and that is turning out to be essential to the forest and how the trees are interconnecting, how they're helping each other, how trees that we had written off as dead are coming back to life. And so that our mortality rate, we say, is around 20%, when in fact it's probably lower. And then the other thing we look at is, well, who cares? The emerging growth that's coming up is equally as exciting as the plants that we chose to plant. And many of them have even more potential than the ones that we selected. And that would apply to a list of emerging plants that I'll just mention. I mean, I haven't even gone through the plants that we intended, but there's like, let's see what we can go through. There's like spiked pepper, and there's sunfo, which is a wild mint. And there's the naranjilla, which is the most spectacularly delicious fruit that grows spontaneously on the site. There's the watercress. And then there's most recently wild potatoes. And then we found things that look just like cucumbers and tomatoes, which we have to further analyze. And then the mushrooms, we've identified 68 to 70 different species, 8 of which are edible. So in addition, that's in addition to the edible tree species that we planted. So I'm thinking, well, why is this happening? And we have 3 ideas. One of them is it's the intelligence of nature. And it's maybe there's some awareness. I mean, this would be more esoteric. It's an awareness of our needs, or maybe there was a previous civilization 500 or 600 years ago that was living there. We are only 2 kilometers above the Inca Trail. And when I had an indigenous leader visit us, he said, you have the spirit of the forest here, and you have all these species of plants that were in favor until the Incan invasion 500 years ago. And now they're not even known. Or certainly not commonly consumed. And so we've been propagating and reproducing. And so our planting list depended on those. So then I have my statistics, which I guess I'm going to have to just show you like here, because you can see, so we have our different tree species that we've planted. Many of them are edible. They're specifically for specific purposes, but you can see phenomenal growth in the last 3 years. We're certainly satisfied. It certainly fits within the realm of what you would hope for any productive system. But it doesn't consider the fact that there's all these other plants, and unfortunately, I printed in black and white, but you can see, for example, this is the wild sunfo, which is a mint. We make a powder out of it that's multifunctional. This is the spiked pepper that creates an incredible essential oil that we're testing further. The poroton, originally our interest was in the poroton as a vegan protein, gluten-free bread, replacement for milk, and yet we're doing trials with Vakingen in Holland, and they're finding that it has antibacterial properties that are more effective against hospital-borne illness than commercial medicines. So like we started one direction, we discover other things. And so the idea is like not to limit ourselves to one thing. This is a horrific photo of the logma. It's basically looks like a big round ball. And with that, we make chips. And from that, we're making flour. And from that, this is actually one of the products that I'll bring to the show, or to the event. But this is the powder that is a beautiful golden color and a caramel flavor that's surprisingly delicious. And the most interesting thing when we did a scientific analysis of it, after planting, we didn't plant it with the objective of knowing all of the benefits, but we're finding after the fact that it's very high in protein. One of the local species in the powder form is 45% protein, and it's naturally sweet, so there's no need to add sugar, and it's particularly high in vitamin K. So what is going on here? What we decided to do in our model was not to introduce any commercial crops. We made a choice not to introduce coffee, even though cloud forest coffee is the rage. We said no, because ultimately, when you introduce crops, ultimately they dominate the landscape, and then the financials basically end up in decimating the forest that you were supposed to protect. And the idea is, well, but you have to be realistic. You have to, have an income generating source. So you should introduce coffee or some other commercial crop that already has a market. And so that's definitely a valid concern. And I don't have the answer yet. But what I can say is we are planting thousands of trees, and we are in the process testing and finding results, and we're working with legitimate labs. We're testing the water. The water, for example, is of extremely high quality, and we're generating water on site. And our water pH, for example, had changed from acid when we began our work in an area that was being degraded by ranching, to now a pH of 7.9. The other structural qualities of the water are, comparable to any of the what are considered the finest waters on earth. And so, if that has potential value, that's great. But again, we cannot limit ourselves to reductionist thinking and to going with one thing or another, as tempting as it is. Originally this is going to be the Porotona, the protein superfood project, with a number of other things planted in a biodiverse agroforestry system. But for me, it's the excitement of the research and of the learning to collect data and to eventually create alternatives for those who are interested in recovering this ecosystem. That is the hope. I'm not sure I've completely gone off anything I plan to say. I just have, let's see, I wish I could, you saw a few of the animals in the video, because I was going to show you that some of the wildlife that's beginning to take advantage of the sites, because we have cameras on the site. We see a number of species, many of them haven't been spotted for over a decade, like there's one particular one, what's the translation for it? It's a type of a jaguar undi, which is a type of jaguar, for example. It's considered, it's called the spirit cat. It's basically not yet generally picked up or seen, but it's taking advantage of the site. We have the mountain paca, or known as the guanta. It's on the IUCN critical risk of extinction list. Then on the site itself, we have tapirs which are reproducing. Generally, you don't see them in couples. Now we see them, walking in couples, which means that they're definitely reproducing. We have the Andean eagle. We have all of this wildlife, and so we want the wildlife to be part of the recovery. And yet my feeling is that if we're patient, we're going to end up with so many phenomenal foods and medicines that are going to be of great benefit for local consumption and could potentially provide an alternative within the biodynamic space for products that are produced in a wild, but not foraging, but more like plant foraging. And I have the understanding that if you look at anthropological records, all that we're doing is reinventing the wheel. This is exactly what was done by indigenous communities 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years ago. It wasn't just wild forest. They were certainly selecting but within a forest environment. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're not introducing any species, and we are building the lab, and the lab is built. This is the twist of the Cloud Forest Center. We made a decision to build it only using recycled materials. In other words, and keep in mind, we have no road access. So how are we supposed to build this thing using wood without cutting down trees? It sounds absolutely impossible. And yet, and my team was like, oh my God, here he goes again. But, I said, well, let's see what happens. And sure enough, we have the geographer using his drones that found a whole section of trees that had fallen or that had been chopped down by a previous invader into the area that we were able to harvest that wood. Some trees just began to fall, and I won't go on further here because I'll be written off as completely bonkers. But what I can say is that we, without cutting down trees, have been able to get the wood that we need. When we did an orchid study, we had limited funding for identifying all the orchids. We had the national orchid specialist, he's the director of the National Biodiversity Center. And on his last day, that night, what, bang, about 100 meters away from our research center, a huge branch falls, and there were over 50 different distinct species of orchids on that branch. So we were, that next day we did, and it's on the Instagram, because we did an orchid rescue because it had fallen into the creek, and we had to basically rescue them, and then we cataloged them and sorted them, and that's also going to be part of the decoration up on at the research site. But we feel like we get these incredible gifts from nature. There's like a reception. And I don't know exactly how to describe it other than to go back to the literature of Goethe, go back to the literature of Steiner, and say maybe we can scientifically prove some of this. The power of nature is, I mean, it was kind of incredible, because before the orchid specialists had come, we had gone on expeditions and we had collected them, but like just to get in the power of nature in like one fall, to get so many species, that was like an overabundance. It was just like a sign of the purpose in collaboration with nature, which I think is ultimately the fundamental concept of biodynamic agriculture. So yes, we are taking into consideration the rhythms of nature. We are taking into consideration what nature has, and we're not introducing elements, not even in our structure, at least as little as we can. The roof, of course, is material that we had to bring in. So we're not fanatics, but it's certainly a goal. It's an intent. And I believe intent matters. And I'm going to end with that, and thank you.
That's just amazing. I was overcome with tears as you were describing the animals, and just, you know, we see so much doom and gloom about extinction and what we're losing, and yet here is just this hope of what we can bring back in cooperation. And the woo is welcome here at Blue Borage. So I wouldn't be surprised if you get people writing saying, I want to hear the rest of that story. How many trees fell so you could build a dwelling? Thank you. Can't wait to meet you in person. Kate, do you have anything you want to just chime in?
It was fabulous. It was absolutely fabulous. And I'm more and more jealous. I'm teaching this fall, so I have to be, I'm remote and living vicariously through Katrina through this experience. But Craig, you're going to just blow it out of the water. It is absolutely fabulous and fascinating and important work that you're doing. I have studied and have certificates in edible food forests. And so I really understand. I also was a tree planter and tree planted way up north. So I know traditional commercial tree planting, and I know the difference of planting in guilds. And one thing I did miss is how much acreage or how many hectares are you converting?
Yeah, that's a great question. The entire site, first off, it's conversion and it's protection, because what I bought was a cattle farm. So it was, when I acquired it, it originally, well, the site was originally 68 hectares, of which 52% of it was deforested. And
Right.
so within that area, that's been the area that we've been regenerating, is the other part, in addition to an additional piece that we've recently taken on, which is another 27 hectares. So this is but more than the acreage, it's the entire. Oh, well, since you asked, this is actually a map. It happened to be here. This is the area of our property site in the Andean Amazon. This area was being degraded outside, and this area is being recovered. And this whole area, which is National Park, was doomed to be deforested, because this activity of cattle ranching was going to just to continue. So but the geographic access makes it difficult to do so. So we basically consider ourselves like the buffer zone to protect an area. So it's not just what we're planting, but what we're keeping from being destroyed.
Yes.
And within that area of where we have intensive plantings itself, we have some areas that are regenerating naturally, because we're also doing testing between rewilding and and planting. So we have, and I didn't go into that, we have 5 test plots. 2 are approximately maybe 5 hectares. The other 2 are maybe another, I'm not exactly sure of the numbers, but maybe another 5 hectares to 7 hectares. But we're not analyzing everything. We're analyzing specific blocks within the forest, and to understand how our mortality is, how the growth is. We're measuring height, we're measuring girth of the trees, but we're also doing periodic testing of the waters. We're doing testing of the soils. We're doing testing of the mycelium in the different test plots. And there we've seen significant structural differences. And then we compare that with the structure of mycelium in wild forest, and begin to understand more about how nature seems to have intent. And,
Yes.
and it's fascinating to see how those structural changes will, you can visually see, that's actually how we started. We saw this white powder around one of the trees that looked like doomed for death that had come back, one of the porotone or the vegetable protein trees. And that's when we decided to test the soil and found that, this remarkable mycelium structure in the soil that was enabling it to come back. There's been work by Susan Simard, which you've probably read. She's looked at the forest intelligence. She looked at how trees send signals out through the mycelium network to other trees, and generally they help their progeny. Usually they help their own species. I would argue that it would be worth exploring if that's completely the case, or if other trees might be interested in supporting, because certain trees are fulfilling different roles. And certainly that's something that I found, was that growth, it's like if you have children, and I have 2 sons, and they were very different, and they had, my oldest son didn't learn to speak until he was nearly 3. And we thought, oh, he needed therapy. And it was just because he was learning a couple of languages at the time. He's a brilliant guy, ended up going to MIT, so certainly didn't have any limitations, but the growth pace of trees is also different. Different species are different, and they may be fulfilling different roles that we need to respect, and we need to be patient. Because certain trees that were growing next to dead are suddenly shooting up, and now they're starting to fruit, and they're starting to produce flowers. So it's really, and we do have this luxury of space, of having the possibility of doing this at scale. Because what's the idea? The idea is that we're looking at cloud forests as a biome that are disappearing. So I want to have the possibility of replication at scale. Ideally, we would have had within this crops that already have a definite market. We don't. But hopefully, and I don't see ourselves being the ones to develop the markets, but I'm hoping at the conference, maybe meeting with companies like Demeter, et cetera, that there may be others that may be interested in saying, yes, we want to support this initiative. We want to support, so as over time, as there's more, if there is a market, then people, and communities can take the risk and get involved. But I'm taking the risk now. I'm gathering the data now, and I don't have the answers now, but I can say that so far the signs are very promising.
Amazing. Craig, I didn't want to take up too much of your time. We've gone over, and I hope this is a sneak preview that people will go to your website and look at the data, look at the film.
Oh, yes, let me give you the Instagram is Cloud Forest Organics. And that is, I don't know if we can put that on the screen, but it's, or if you can, I don't know how we can type
put
that.
it in the description under the video on YouTube.
It's Cloud Forest Organics is the Instagram. I'd be happy if you follow us. We're permanently updating with surprises and developments. That's really our most active channel. And we have a documentary, Crystal Frog, that we'll soon be putting out, after it completes the festival circuit. It is a circus, but I mean the festival circuit. That was a definite Freudian slip.
You're available for podcasts. I think your project needs to be shown far and wide all over the world. That if someone,
You know what it is? I feel I've been hesitant because we're still learning. I don't have answers. I've been able to share with you our developments so far. And there's every day there's new discoveries, new learning. So I guess I can share our journey
I think it's
and what we've done
inspirational.
so far. That I'd be happy to do.
Yeah, I'll be sharing this with a few people saying, you got to interview this guy. It's phenomenal.
Well, I'm sorry that I wasn't able to present the slides, but let me ask you this, Kate, did you feel that you needed to see more? Did the video help?
The video was fabulous and it makes me want to see more. And you are riveting and you are so beautifully articulate. You are obviously so deep in the development and so inspired and passionate about this work that the slides were, I didn't need them. I was just riveted by everything you were sharing. So it's enough. The divinity of the project is enough.
All right, that sounds great. And thank you for your feedback. Thank you for taking the time. And we will definitely have to meet at some point along this journey. You're in New Zealand? You're in Canada.
I'll
You're
be
in-
at the conference.
you're in
We'll share a
Canada?
meal or have a coffee together. And Kate's in Canada. She's not coming to the conference, but you'll have to meet up somehow.
All right,
Yeah.
I'll follow you.
Okay.
great.
I'm going to stop the recording here. Thank you so much, Craig.
Thank you.